Have you ever felt that instant, suffocating panic when you realize someone is about to uncover something you swore would remain hidden forever? That moment when your heartbeat races, your thoughts scatter, and every second stretches into eternity? I found myself in exactly that position one quiet evening, standing in the hallway of my own home, aware that a single misstep could shatter the life I thought I knew. My father was just outside the room, his footsteps deliberate, the sound echoing in the hollow of my fear. And there I was, caught between the irresistible pull of desire and the crushing weight of guilt. My name is Syra, and I grew up in a house that prided itself on perfection. Everything was meticulously ordered, the floors gleamed, the curtains were always drawn just so, and every word spoken in the presence of my father carried an unspoken expectation of obedience and propriety. My father, a stern and commanding man, ruled our home with precision, leaving little room for error, and even less for emotional expression. My mother, distant and absorbed in her own world, rarely noticed the nuances of our lives. But it wasn't just the strict rules that shaped me. It was the silent tension that hung between the lines of our carefully maintained appearances. Then there was Ayan, my stepbrother, though technically not related by blood. He had been part of my life for nearly a decade, and over time I had come to see him as both a companion and a source of fascination I couldn't quite explain. Ayan was magnetic, confident, sharp, and effortlessly charming. He could make anyone feel like the most important person in the room, and he seemed to understand the unspoken spaces in people's hearts, including mine. Our interactions were once casual, innocent, even brotherly, but as we grew older, subtle shifts began to occur. Glances lingered a moment too long, touches were brushed off as accidental, and the conversations we had in private carried a tension that neither of us could ignore. That evening, my father had gone out for work, leaving the house unusually silent. The living room lamp cast warm golden shadows, transforming familiar corners into intimate, secretive spaces. I could feel Ayan's presence keenly, the way he leaned slightly closer when he thought no one was watching, the quiet gravity in his voice when he spoke to me alone. The air between us seemed charged with possibilities I wasn't sure I was ready to face. As I sat there, aware of the risk yet unable to step back, I realized something frightening. Desire and danger had converged in a single breathtaking instant. I was standing at the edge of a line I had always known existed, and for the first time, I felt the magnetic pull to cross it. My father's absence was temporary, yet it had created a space where forbidden emotions could flourish. And in that tension-filled quiet, I sensed that the life I had carefully maintained could unravel in a heartbeat. One step, one glance, one choice. That was all it would take. And I was dangerously close. The days that followed that evening were a strange mixture of tension and longing. Every glance at Ayan, every accidental touch, carried a weight I couldn't shake. It was as if our secret had its own heartbeat, pulsing quietly beneath the surface of ordinary life. At school or around family, he was the same charming, easygoing stepbrother I had always known, but in private, there was an unspoken current that made every conversation feel dangerous. I started noticing details about him I had never paid attention to before. The way his fingers absent-mindedly traced patterns on the table, the quiet intensity in his gaze when he thought I wasn't looking, the subtle smirk that hinted at thoughts he refused to voice. Each observation was like a spark against dry tinder, igniting emotions I tried to suppress but couldn't. And the harder I tried to ignore it, the more acute the tension became. My father, ever meticulous, remained blissfully unaware, or perhaps deliberately blind, to the undercurrents in the house. His presence alone was enough to enforce discipline, yet it also highlighted the forbidden nature of what was growing between Ayan and me. Every evening, when the house fell into silence, I would catch myself anticipating Ayan's casual closeness, the small moments that set my pulse racing and my mind spinning. Our interactions became a careful dance, balancing the ordinary and the illicit, each of us aware that discovery would mean devastation. Even my own thoughts betrayed me. I questioned myself constantly. Why am I drawn to this? What would happen if we were caught? The answers were never simple. There was guilt, yes, but also a thrilling intensity I had never experienced before. A part of me told me to stop, to pull back and restore the boundaries that had existed for so long. Another part, a reckless, desperate part, wanted to lean in, to feel the electricity of connection that we shared in those fleeting private moments. One afternoon, as I lingered in the kitchen while Ayan made tea, our hands brushed lightly while reaching for the same cup. The spark was immediate, undeniable. He looked at me, eyes sharp but soft, and in that glance was a challenge and a confession all at once. "We shouldn't," he whispered. Yet there was a tremor in his voice that betrayed how little he meant it. That single touch, the way his gaze held mine, crystallized the tension that had been building for weeks. The risk of exposure, the thrill of secrecy, the magnetic pull of something I couldn't name, all collided into a single moment that left me trembling and breathless. And yet, lurking beneath the excitement was a stark truth. Our choices were dangerous. One careless step, one slip, and everything. Our family, our trust, our sense of right and wrong, could unravel instantly. I felt it in my bones, the precariousness of the line we were walking. Little did I know, the next weeks would bring moments that would test us, push boundaries further, and leave me teetering on the edge of a secret I might not survive keeping. Every quiet smile, every subtle touch, was a reminder that temptation and disaster were walking hand in hand. The tension between Ayan and me was no longer a quiet undercurrent. It had become a living, breathing force, shaping every moment we shared. Every glance across the room, every accidental brush of our hands, carried the weight of unspoken desire and inevitable guilt. I began noticing how my pulse quickened even when he wasn't near, the memory of his touch lingering on my skin as if it had imprinted itself there permanently. One evening, after my father had left for a late meeting, the house felt unusually empty, the silence almost conspiratorial. Ayan and I found ourselves in the study, ostensibly to review some family documents, but the pretense barely concealed the tension that thrummed between us. He leaned over my shoulder, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body, the faint scent of his cologne stirring memories I didn't want to acknowledge. "We're playing with fire," I whispered, my voice trembling despite my attempt at calm. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, his eyes locked with mine, intense and unwavering. "And yet," he murmured, "fire is the only thing that feels alive." I wanted to step back, to reassert the boundaries I knew we should respect, but my body betrayed me. Every instinct screamed caution, yet there was a magnetic pull I couldn't resist. It wasn't just attraction. It was a shared understanding, a dangerous intimacy that had quietly built over months. And now, with the house empty, it seemed unstoppable. The minutes stretched into a tense, suspended silence. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner, the soft tick of the wall clock, and my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. Every sound was amplified. Every shadow seemed to conceal potential discovery. The possibility that my father, or anyone, could return at that exact moment made the thrill sharper, more urgent, more intoxicating. Then it happened. A fleeting moment, barely a touch, but it was enough. Our hands brushed again, this time deliberately, and the charge between us sparked into something undeniable. I froze, panic and desire colliding in a chaotic storm inside me. The risk of being caught loomed over us like a dark cloud, yet I couldn't pull away. "We have to be careful," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Ayan's smile was brief, but knowing. "I know," he said, "but sometimes the hardest thing isn't resisting. It's pretending we're not feeling it." The words hung in the air, and I felt the magnitude of what we were doing settle over me. This wasn't a fleeting infatuation. It was a dangerous, consuming connection that threatened to unravel the fragile threads of my life. Every choice we made from here on would carry consequences I couldn't yet imagine, and the thought made my stomach twist. As I left the study that night, heart still racing, I realized that we were no longer just skirting the edge of danger. We were teetering on the brink. One misstep, one moment of carelessness, and the secret we were nurturing in the shadows could explode, leaving nothing intact. And deep down, I knew that soon we would be forced to confront the impossible truth, that some desires, no matter how consuming, come at a price too high to pay. Weeks of stolen moments and whispered conversations had built to a tension I could no longer contain. One evening, the quiet of our home was shattered, not by a loud confrontation, but by a revelation that cut deeper than any raised voice could. My father had discovered something, though how much he knew I couldn't yet tell. The moment I realized it, a cold, sinking dread settled in my chest, heavier than any fear I had felt before. I remember standing in the hallway, frozen, listening to the muted voices from the living room. My father's tone was quiet but firm, carrying a weight I could not ignore. He wasn't shouting, yet the disappointment in his voice was a force in itself, pressing down on me, threatening to crush the fragile composure I had managed to maintain. "You were just one step away," he said, each word deliberate, "from losing everything I thought you stood for." The words reverberated through me. One step away. That was all it had taken for the world I knew to tilt on its axis. Every glance I had shared with Ayan, every secretive conversation, every brush of our hands, it could have been exposed in a heartbeat. The thrill I had felt in those moments now felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Ayan stood nearby, his expression unreadable, yet I could sense the tension coiling around him like a living thing. I wanted to reach out, to touch him, to reassure him, or perhaps reassure myself, but the magnitude of what was happening made movement feel impossible. We had crossed a line, and the consequences were no longer abstract. They were here, tangible, waiting to claim us. In the ensuing silence, I found myself reflecting on every choice I had made. The subtle indulgence of curiosity, the deliberate moments of closeness, the dangerous dance of desire that had brought us here. I had known the risk, yet I had let it grow, nurtured it even, and now the consequences loomed like a storm I could not evade. My father's eyes were filled with a mixture of hurt and disbelief, a combination more painful than anger. He saw the truth without needing every detail spelled out, and in that realization I felt the full weight of betrayal. Not just to him, but to the moral framework I had promised to uphold. Ayan and I retreated into a quiet understanding. There was no room for the thrill anymore, no secrets safe in the shadows. The intimacy we had shared, the dangerous connection we had fostered, had irrevocably changed the landscape of our lives. We were left with memory, with remorse, and the sobering truth that some boundaries exist for a reason. That night, as I lay awake, the echoes of my father's words haunted me. One step away. That single, infinitesimal distance had been the line between destruction and survival, and though the immediate danger had passed, the awareness of how easily trust could shatter remained, a constant, haunting reminder of the fragility of everything I had once taken for granted. In the days that followed, the house seemed heavier, as if every corner remembered what had almost been exposed. Ayan and I moved through our routines with careful restraint, the invisible tension lingering in every glance and word. There were no more fleeting touches or secret smiles. The intimacy that had once defined our connection had been replaced by silence, thick and unyielding. I found myself reflecting constantly on the night my father had nearly discovered us. That single step, that almost imperceptible moment of exposure, had forced a reckoning I could never ignore. It revealed the fragility of trust, the fine line between desire and destruction, and the consequences of choices we sometimes make without fully considering their weight. Every memory of those stolen moments carried both longing and regret, a duality that I could neither erase nor fully reconcile. Ayan and I began to drift apart, not out of anger, but necessity. The connection that had been thrilling and dangerous became a reminder of how close we had come to losing everything. Our conversations were polite, careful, measured, acknowledgments of shared history without revisiting the emotional minefield that had brought us together. The intensity of what we had experienced remained, a quiet ache beneath the surface, but the boundaries were clear, firm, and unyielding. Life, in its slow and deliberate way, returned to a semblance of normalcy. My father remained stern but forgiving, though I could sense the subtle shift in our relationship, an unspoken awareness of the precariousness that had once existed. I carried the guilt like a shadow, a constant reminder of the dangers of indulgence and the importance of integrity. The lessons were harsh but unforgettable. Desire is potent, temptation is relentless, and boundaries exist for a reason, even now, months later. I can still feel the memory of that night, the tension, the adrenaline, the heart-stopping fear of being caught. It is a reminder that some choices leave permanent impressions, even when no immediate consequences follow. I have learned to navigate the complexities of human emotion with greater caution, to recognize the difference between fleeting temptation and true connection, and to value the fragile trust that binds family and loved ones. I often think about what could have happened, about how a single misstep could have undone everything I had worked to preserve. And yet, I also understand that those experiences, though painful, shaped me in ways nothing else could. They taught me the weight of secrets, the cost of indulgence, and the resilience required to move forward with humility and self-awareness. As I close my eyes at night, I sometimes hear the echo of my father's words, the heartbeat of a moment that almost became a turning point in my life. One step away, so close to catastrophe yet far enough to survive. And in that delicate balance, I learned the most important truth. Some moments teach us not by the consequences we suffer, but by the choices we almost make.